Today I want to talk to people about the I-94 record. The I-94 document is something that's issued to all non-immigrant or temporary visitors to the U.S. Now, this document governs the length of time you can remain in the U.S., and it's important to remember it's distinguishable from the visa stamp that's been placed in your passport by the U.S. Embassy or Consulate. The visa stamp in your passport only governs your ability to travel to the U.S. and seek entry to the U.S. The I-94 document is issued by U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the U.S. port of entry after you've been interviewed or inspected by the border officer. If you establish that you qualify for the particular visa classification you're seeking entry under, the officer will approve your entry to the U.S. and issue you this I-94 document. It has your name on it, your visa classification, the expiration date of your allowed period of stay. Now, back in the day, this was a paper document that the officer stapled into your passport. Now it's something that has to be looked up and obtained online. But again, the I-94 record provides how long you can stay in the U.S. and if you're coming in on a temporary work visa, how long you can work in the U.S. Now, oftentimes the expiration date of your I-94 record will not correspond to the expiration date of your visa stamp. Different times frames will apply to different visa categories. For example, a person can get a TN visa stamp valid for 4 years, but may only be admitted to the U.S. and receive an I-94 record valid for 3 years. Even if you're coming to the U.S. as a visitor without a visa stamp, now here I'm looking at you, Canadian citizens, you will still have an I-94 record in the system. Now, it's important to look up that I-94 record as soon as possible during each entry to the U.S., ideally before you leave the immigration office. You want to make sure, number one, that you've been designated under the right visa classification. Number two, you want to make sure that you know how long you're permitted to stay in the U.S., and you want to make sure that your period of stay is appropriate and that you've not been shortchanged any time. Number three, you also want to make sure that your name is correct, your date of birth is also in there correctly. It's much easier to fix errors on the I-94 document while you're right at the office as opposed to after the fact. Additionally, if you don't notice an error in the I-94 document until months down the road, that can create major headaches for you. It can also result in significant immigration penalties as well. For example, if you're coming to the U.S. as a TN visa worker, and instead of being issued a 3-year I-94 record, for some reason you are issued incorrectly a 6-month I-94 record as a visitor, and you don't notice that error until after that I-94 record has expired, well, guess what? From the government's point of view, you've overstayed your visa, which by itself can pose problems for your immigration status. But if it's been more than 6 months since that I-94 document has expired, not only have you overstayed, but you've also accumulated unlawful presence. That can result in you being considered barred from the U.S. for 3 or 10 years. So the lesson I want to impart here is every time you enter the U.S., before you leave the office, before you leave the airport, punch in your passport data, check that I-94 record to make sure it's got the correct visa classification, correct expiration date. I also recommend downloading it, saving it to your files. Not only will you potentially need old I-94 documents for certain green card filings, but if down the road an officer makes a mistake, the next time you enter the U.S. and gives you a different visa category or different expiration date, you can use that originally issued I-94 document to help explain to an officer later on to get a corrected I-94 document.